Today we're giving you our Dynasty rankings for the tight end position. Dave, you're a squatter at the gym. You know all about having a good tight end, right? Yeah,
Plump tight end over here. Yep.
yeah. Robust tight end strategy would be
There
used in
you go.
Dynasty.
Double
And you know
cheeked
what?
up on a Tuesday.
Oh God, yeah. It's definitely we're coming off Memorial Day weekend the right way. Man, tight end, honestly, unless the tight end premium league, I feel like tight ends just don't get the love that they deserve. And honestly, it's a position that I think can actually just change the outcome of whether it's your dynasty team, your fantasy team, everything. It becomes sort of that skeleton key that gives you just a massive advantage. And I think last year, a lot of people, just to give that fantasy relevance, if you drafted Travis Kelsey last year, he kind of sank your team because you drafted him so early and it didn't work out. If you took that risk on a Brock Bowers, however, you were probably in the championship or a top two, top three team in your league. And in Dynasty, you're more than happy with that now. Dave, I'm excited to sit down and rank some tight ends with you.
And I think that's what people hate so much about the tight ends is it is so much like the haves or the have-nots. Like if you've got one of those league tilting difference makers, which we see anywhere between like 1 in 3 every single year, you're feeling great about it. And if you don't, like the difference between having like a top 5 tight end and a top 20 tight end is so negligible. It doesn't even matter. Like if you don't have one of these league tilting guys, you are just streaming week to week and hoping your guy can fall into the touchdown because you've got your handful of guys, your Brock Bowers, your Travis Kelsey's in the past, your Mark Andrews in the past, your Rob Gronkowski's in the past that are going to give you like 80 yards and a touchdown every single week. And the rest of the tight end position, you're hoping for 32 yards and a touchdown and a handful of catches. It's really just, you need those difference makers. But now we're seeing this very weird change in the NFL, especially in the tight end landscape. Like all of the guys that we have loved for years are starting to age out pretty quickly. Travis Kelsey and George Kittle and some of the other guys. And now we're seeing a lot of these prospects that we liked from early in their careers breaking out now in their late 20s. And we'll talk about a lot of those guys. And then we also see all of these really young, good tight ends, not just the rookies, but from last year's draft class and the draft class the year before. So I don't know if there's a quicker changing landscape right now than the tight ends when you look at all the different positions.
And the good news is that Kyle Pitts is still just 19 years old. So there's a really good dynasty ceiling ahead of him. All right, let's jump into our rankings here. Tier number one should be no surprise. At one, we've got Brock Bowers, and at two, we've got Trey McBride. Dave, you and I are in lockstep on these. I mean, honestly, I was looking for any excuse to put Trey McBride at one because I love Trey McBride. I think he's just a fantastic athlete, good after the catch, solid hands. Brock Bowers just it's almost not even fair to put him at the tight end position. I think he's everything that we wanted Kyle Pitts to be, where you can line him up anywhere in the offense. He can be the number one target on this offense. And I know that the Raiders are going to make this change where they have Ashton Jinty there, and there's going to be a lot more running. But I still see an offense where the volume might not be as high, but the efficiency and the scoring output could be a lot better, especially with Geno Smith at quarterback.
100%. And if there's one thing that you want to say, like the reason to like Trey McBride more than Brock Bowers, I'd argue that the short term output for Trey McBride is probably a little bit more exciting than Brock Bowers. Even though Brock Bowers had more fantasy points last year, you do talk about some of the changes in coaching philosophy. Now with Ashton Jinty there, I'd expect the team to run a little bit more. And Brock Bowers, for all that he does as a receiver, is a mauler as a blocker too. I mean, he's going to make Ashton Jinty's job even easier sealing off those edges. But last year, if you look, I think this surprises a lot of people. I mean, the production was almost identical. If you look at the targets, if you look at the receptions, if you look at the yardage, the huge edge that Brock Bowers had last year was obviously in touchdowns, where Trey McBride really struggled to find the end zone. But Trey McBride had a pretty significant advantage in target share, meaning he was a more focal point of his offensive passing attack. Had almost 30% target share last year. Actually, if you put Trey McBride into the list of receivers with target share, he'd have fallen in sixth there. I mean, like
Wow.
really, really an offensive focal point. Brock Bowers was too, but with Devontae Adams there for half the year, he didn't get quite the same target share. Now with Jacoby Myers there and Jack Besh there and running a little bit heavier,
Mm.
I could see Trey McBride potentially outscoring Brock Bowers over the next year or two, but Brock Bowers is 3 years younger. It took Trey McBride until year 3 in his NFL career to really break out the way he did last year. Brock Bowers did it as a rookie. So I think when you're looking long term in Dynasty, you've got to put Brock Bowers ahead, but it wouldn't surprise me if Trey McBride has a better season this year.
I mean, I think anything's possible. I do think the arrows are sort of pointing in different directions for these guys. If we try hard enough, we can poke holes in any of their profiles, right? Like we
Right.
could say Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the come up for the Cardinals. That's going to mean less targets for Trey McBride. There's a million things you could say. With Brock Bowers, I think the thing that I like right now is I think it's safe to assume we've probably got at least 2 years of the Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly experiment that's going on in Las
Yeah.
Vegas, especially with the way they set themselves up with Geno and with Ashton Ginty. And so with that, I mean, Chip Kelly's always been a guy that's just going to use and utilize tight ends often and utilize multiple tight ends and put them out in the slot, whether that was in pros with like Zach Ertz or even in college with a guy like Greg Dulcich, who
Yeah.
we haven't really heard from since he's been in the league. Brock Bowers is sort of that guy that he can use. I don't want to say Joker because that's not really how they're going to utilize him, but they
I mean,
can they
yeah.
can they can
I
utilize him
think
as a Joker. Like
I'd say Brock Bowers is more likely to be in a Joker role than Evan Ingram is, regardless of what social media wants to tell
right.
you and what Sean Payton wants to say and what Evan Ingram wants to tweet. At the end of the day, Evan Ingram is a slot receiver, and Brock Bowers is a Joker who can take a handoff. He can be a wildcat quarterback. He can put his hand in line. He can play out wide. He can play in the slot. He is a true queen on a chessboard that you can just put anywhere in the formation.
All right. Let's go to the next tier because I think everyone gets it. Those two players are really good. If you have them on your team, you're keeping them. In the second tier, at 3, we've got a 3-way tie. So we're just gonna list these guys as 3, 4, and 5, but they're all equal. Sam LaPorta, Colston Loveland, and TJ Hawkinson. And what's crazy is that you and I do not agree on a single one of their rankings, yet
Yeah.
somehow all 3 players have tied at the 4.5 consensus, which makes them the number 3
Analytics.
tight end. Yep, analytics. This is analytics. At 6, let's call it that, George Kittle, who's also tied with Tyler Warren. So basically, this tier of 3 through 7 is a bunch of players that are tied in one way or another to each other, and our rankings are different for every single one of them. And I think it just comes down to preference as to how you look at these players. And Dave, something we were talking about before the show is I still look at how much the NFL and fantasy football changes year in and year out, where I know there's the whole thing of like, look at Dynasty long term, look at Dynasty in a 3-year window. And honestly, I'm just kind of looking at it in a 2-year window, maybe sometimes even less, which might be irresponsible. But I think what it does is it allows me to give a little more value to these guys that are the veterans, like the George Kittles of the world. And ironically, you're higher on TJ Hawkinson. So, I mean, I don't know that you have like a golden rule on these players, but I think I'm willing to give a little more grace to an older player like a George Kittle and say, okay, Tyler Warren, I know he's a phenomenal prospect. I don't necessarily love the landing spot. I'm not sure what we're going to get from him or the Colts offense over the next year or two. That's why I have him at 7. You've got him at 5. So that's where we got some of our discrepancies here.
Yeah, with TJ Hawkinson, he's still just 27. And I know 27, like, especially if you're thinking about other positions, 27 is kind of when wide receivers start to peak. By the
Yep.
time a running back's 27, they're pretty much on borrowed time. 27-year-old tight end hasn't even reached his peak yet. We typically see tight ends peak at 28 years old and
He's
then maintain that.
27.9 years old.
He is, yeah. He'll be 30 or he'll be 28
I
in
just
about a
know
week.
someone was going to tell you in the comments. He's going to be
Right.
28 tomorrow, idiot. Yeah.
It's like a week. He's still got a little bit of time before he turns 28. But yeah, he will be 28 soon.
This is
But
America. We don't get fixed on the minutia of it, Dave. He's 27.
he's 27, right? And he'll play at his age 28 season. So this theoretically should be the best season for TJ Hawkinson. And then he'll maintain that elite production over the next 2-3 years. And we'll see this a lot as we start getting, I don't want to spoil the show and start throwing out a bunch of other names, but there are a lot of tight ends that don't even really break out till they're 27, 28, 29 years old. TJ Hawkinson broke out as a rookie and has maintained that production throughout his entire career. He's just been a stalwart of the passing attack, regardless of what offense he's been in since he came into the league. Now, he doesn't have the game breaking athleticism. He's never going to be ripping off these 80-yard touchdowns or anything like that, but he is just such a natural receiver. And especially in the situation he's at this Kevin O'Connell offense with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, they draw the gravity of the defense. And you see it, like, you watch a Vikings game, TJ Hawkinson is just on an island sitting in the flat on almost every single play. And that's why he gets so many targets. And then he's got room to move after catching the ball because, like I said, the defense is focusing on the wide receivers there. So it's not just that, though, because even if you look back in his time in Detroit before he had Justin Jefferson on his team, he was still a guy who was just consistently open. Kind of reminds me of Zach Ertz, where he doesn't have the,
Yeah.
super great athleticism, but just that ability to sit in his zone and pull targets and make plays and catch touchdowns. That tells me that he's going to have a long and prolific career. Coming off the torn ACL, so last year was obviously a little bit of a down season, but as long as JJ McCarthy can keep the ship afloat, I think we see TJ Hawkinson go right back into that top 3 production we've seen over the last 5 years.
I think the best metaphor I saw in regards to this Vikings offense was it's like giving a Ferrari to a freshly licensed 16-year-old. And you're like, man, it could go really bad, but if it's successful, good for that kid. And that's kind of where I'm at with JJ McCarthy. We just haven't seen
to
enough
to
from him.
piggyback off of that, if you look back at the if we're sticking with the car theme here,
Yeah.
in Michigan, he was driving like a 2008 Toyota Camry,
Okay.
so that's a pretty big jump to a
Okay.
brand new Ferrari.
Don't take shots at Toyota Camrys. That was my first car. It's a great car. Still miss it every day. But yeah, man, it's just from the talent level alone and the production I know we can get from TJ Hawkinson, I can see why you have him at 3, and I could very easily put him there over Sam LaPorta, over George Kittle, over Colson Loveland, and because of the age as well. I think it's more so the concerns with the Vikings offense and what are they going to be? What's going to be the identity under JJ McCarthy? How much are they going to continue to commit to the run with Aaron Jones and now newly signed Jordan Mason or traded for Jordan Mason? It's just we might get a Jordan Addison suspension. Like there's a lot of things looming, and I'm just kind of comfortable saying, yeah, TJ Hawkinson, top 6 dynasty tight end. Like I'm good with that. I think that's not our biggest discrepancy. Our biggest discrepancy is actually George Kittle, Dave. I've got him as my tight end 4. You've got him as your tight end 8. Tell the world, including Mr. Kittle himself, why you hate George Kittle.
I thought I had him as tight end 7, but I think things might have got a little bit wonky with our projections. I'm looking at
Okay,
I have him at tight end 7, so a little bit
let's
of
say you got him at 7 then. Let's
yeah,
move that
and
around.
really it's just the age. I mean,
Okay.
he's going into his age 32 season right now, and I just did a big long article about the tight end landscape and putting all these guys in buckets and whatnot. And I said George Kittle is without a doubt, inarguably the best tight end in football right now. Like the way that he can be used when he puts his hand in the dirt, he's basically an all-pro offensive tackle. I mean, he just gets to play as like a third tackle on that offensive line when they need him to do that. When they need a short pass to him, he can break a tackle and then rip off an 80-yard touchdown. He can go up the seam and gash you for a huge downfield play. I mean, there isn't a flaw in his game. It's just the age. It is as simple as that. Going into his age 32 season, we've probably seen his best years behind him. I think the likely scenario for George Kittle is that we still get 1, 2, maybe even 3 years of elite production, especially now with Deebo Samuel out of the picture and Brandon Ayuk on the mend. I think George Kittle is going to be the offensive focal point to start this year. But if you're betting on elite production for 2, 3, 4 years down the road, that's a little bit tougher. I mean, we have seen it before. Tony Gonzalez, Travis Kelsey, Antonio Gates, all guys who are able to log top 5 seasons beyond age 35.
They didn't do
But
it the same way though. Like because
exactly.
Kittle's that run after catch guy. Those
Right.
were the highly touchdown dependent players that were top targets in their offense.
So I love George Kittle, and I really do, and I think that what I wrote in my article, I think that if you are a contender and you have an obvious need at tight end, what you want to do is you want to look and see who's rostering George Kittle, and if you see a team that's headed towards a rebuild, I think you could pry him away for cheap. But I think in most instances, he's just a hold because he was a tight end 1
Yeah.
last year. He could be the tight end 1 again this year, but we know how delicate long-term value you can get for guys once they get up here in this age. God forbid George Kittle goes out and hurts himself this year, doesn't play at all in 2025. At that point, he's going into 2026, 33 years old, coming off an injury. The end could be here, could get another couple of years. I think the likely scenario is another 1, 2, maybe 3 years of elite production, and then kind of a steady decline over the next few years. If you want to make that bet, I think it's a fine bet. I would just prefer betting on Colson Loveland, Tyler Warren, Sam Laporta, and TJ Hawkinson, who I think still have room to grow in value.
And that's the thing. Like that's the fundamental difference is when you mentioned 4 years down the line, I'm just like, dude, I don't even know what my own life looks like 4 years down the line, let alone what the life of George Kittle and the Niners is going to look like. So that's why I don't even plan like that for Dynasty, which I know some people are just like, well, that's stupid. That's the whole point of Dynasty is plan long term. But with how often trade values change, managers within leagues get impatient. I really trust my ability to draft rookies too. So like I'm kind of comfortable with that and just making that play every year. Like run it back. Let's go for that championship. That's why I have George Kittle a little bit higher. Like I'm okay with having him there because I do think you're right, Dave. Probably get 2 years of very good to elite production. And then things we could see a sharp decline there.
Yeah.
Especially with now we got that contract for Brock Purdy. Good for him, man. Congrats, Brock Purdy.
And George
Heck yeah.
Kittle got a contract too. He got a
Oh
nice
yeah.
extension, so
Oh
he'll
yeah.
be in San
The guy we were
Francisco for a
talking
while.
about.
But I think Travis Kelsey is kind of the perfect example, and he's a couple of years older. But I mean, Travis Kelsey, if you looked 2 years ago, unanimous tight end one in
Yep.
dynasty rankings. Last year, the signs of decline were there a little bit, and people bumped him down to tight end 3 or tight end 4 in dynasty rankings. And now all of a sudden he's like tight end 20 in dynasty
Yeah.
rankings, and people aren't even touching him in startups. And I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen to George Kittle, but when it happens, it does happen fast. And like I said, just one injury plague season or one down year in 2025, and George Kittle could be looking at a tight end 20 value in dynasty next year. Where when you look at Loveland and Warren and LaPorta, those guys have a little bit more value insulation. There's nothing that can happen to them that's going to make them fall in rankings the way Kittle could.
Let's go down the rankings. Let's go to tier 3. And in tier
Let's
3
talk
here,
about. Can we talk about LaPorta for a quick second? Because we do have a pretty big
I know you
dissension
really want to. I
on
know you
LaPorta.
want to. Go for it.
I,
I
I,
was
I do.
fine with LaPorta at 3. You've got him a lot lower.
I do have him a lot lower, and his value has slipped quite a bit since last year. But I just want to point something out. First of all, I was like dubbed the biggest Sam LaPorta hater in the industry last year when I said everybody was crazy for
Who
taking him
did this?
tight end
Who
one
dubs this?
overall.
Who are these
Huh?
people?
Oh,
Who
lots
do
of
I have
people have
who do I have to
dubbed
write a
me
letter
the
to?
LaPorta hater. But I had him last year. He was my tight end 4 in redraft rankings, and I saw the touchdown rate his rookie season, and everybody was banking on, well, that touchdown rate can turn into
Yeah, we were
bigger
talking about this
opportunities in
all
year 2.
summer.
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen. The touchdown rate regressed, but the usage regressed tremendously too. So my biggest concern was that as a rookie, he had a 21.1% target share that was 6th among tight ends. That dropped to 17% last year, 14th among tight ends. So when I look at the usage profile, when I look at the athletic profile, when I look at the efficiency profile for Sam LaPorta, I see a middling to back end tight end 1, which is fine in fantasy football. But we're seeing his value start to fall now in dynasty rankings. And I still don't think it's fallen quite far enough. I don't think there's anything Sam LaPorta can do to ever get into the Trey McBride or the Brock Bowers tier of tight ends at this point. Now you look at the emergence of Jameson Williams, the loss of Ben Johnson. There's a lot in flux right now in Detroit. And my fear with LaPorta is that he's kind of this middling tight end 1. But if you want him in dynasty, you got to pay up early for him. I mean, he's always going as the 3rd tight end off the board. I am much lower on him, which means I'm not getting any Sam LaPorta in Dynasty. But I think where I've got him is a middling tight end 1 is kind of where he belongs. I don't understand what's still holding his value up there because we saw 1 year with a lot of touchdowns, then we saw a huge drop off in efficiency, and now we see increased target competition and a brain drain from the coaching staff, but people are still holding it down, valuing LaPorta as this elite tight end, and I just don't see it.
I think a lot of it has to do with the age. He's still 24 years old. And then you start to look at how the year finished for him, and it was like it was careful. You okay? Safety first.
Sorry.
I think a lot of us remember the early part of the season last year because he was drafted so highly, and then you got like 7 just rough weeks of Sam LaPorta, and then as the year went on and the Jameson Williams effect and the surprise and the shock and awe of the Lions offense wore off, everything sort of started to normalize. I wouldn't say that Sam LaPorta wowed anybody, but he was pumping out double-digit weeks every single week, and he was tight end 6 from week 8 to the end of the season. So, I mean, you're right. That is, by definition, middling tight end 1. But I think when you've got a guy that can be the tight end 6, he's still just 24 years old, and we've seen that he does have some touchdown upside. It's not one of these things where I'm banging the table that I need to get Sam LaPorta in dynasty startups or that I'm going out and trading for him, but it becomes a de facto thing where I'm like, well, I don't necessarily want to put a 31-year-old George Kittle ahead of him. I don't necessarily want to put an unproven rookie tight end in front of him that is also probably in a crowded situation. So I end up just being happy with Sam LaPorta where he's at, and I can understand why you went with Hawkinson at 3. You and I have Hawkinson and LaPorta flipped at 3 and
Mhm.
6 on our rankings.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, right now, consensus rankings, if we're looking to keep trade cut, Sam Laporta is a tight end 3 there, valued ahead of Colson Loveland, ahead of Tyler Warren, and even ahead of TJ Hawkinson. If I can take my Sam Laporta shares and tier down to any of those guys, getting additional picks and players on top, I think that I don't
Oh
want to say
yeah,
like a must make move, but if I had Sam Laporta, I would desperately be trying to tear down right now.
yeah, I'd be happy with that. You trade Sam LaPorta for Hawkinson and a second, one of those teams
Second,
that's trying to get younger. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I
Give
don't know
me
that anyone
Loveland
does
in the
that, but
third
yeah.
for Laporta, and I'd gladly do that. Or Loveland and a Trey Benson, or one of these year two running backs that we're excited about. I think that's probably enough for me to move off of Sam Laporta right now.
All right, let's go to tier 3. And this is going to be tight ends 8 through 13. And at 8, we've got Dalton Kincaid. The breakout's coming, Dave. It's going to happen at some point. At 9, David Njoku. At 10, high schooler Kyle Pitts. He's just aging backwards. At 11, Tucker Kraft. At 12, Mark Andrews. And at 13, Evan Ingram. And Dave, you and I are in lockstep on Dalton Kincaid. We're in lockstep on Kyle Pitts over at 10. Where we have our biggest dissension here in our rankings is David Njoku. I guess I remain the hater on David Njoku. I've got him at tight end 11. You've got him at tight end 7. So we got a 4-spot difference. For me, the Njoku thing has nothing to do with the talent. It just we saw it again last year. Like there's just times of the season where he will just go completely missing. I have a really hard time believing in this Cleveland Browns offense, despite actually Kevin Stefanski being a good coach. I just don't know what version of Joe Flacco we're getting. I get it. Like we kind of all, myself included, romanticize how good Flacco was two
Doesn't even
seasons
sound
ago.
like Flacco. It sounds like
Kenny
Pickett is
Pickett.
currently
That's like that is
even
DefCon.
worse.
That's what it's one, right? Like if that's the order,
I don't know.
DefCon 1 is the worst and 5 is
I
the
think
best.
Flacco would have been great for fantasy. Like if Pickett is the starter, ugh, ugh.
Oh my God, like I can't imagine the city of Cleveland dealing with that.
My guess would be that we see 3 different starting quarterbacks from the Browns this year. Probably Pickett to start the year, then he probably gets benched for Flacco, and
I'm
then they
gonna
say,
say
"What are we
4.
doing with?" Yeah, I mean, if Watson is healthy by the end of the year, do we see them just say like, "Well, let's just see what we got in Watson before 2016." We might see a little flash of Dylan Gabriel or Shador Sanders in there. It's going to be rough for Browns.
Let me see. David Njoku. I mean, on a per game basis, he actually was quite good. He was tight end 4, but it's
Yeah,
it's this stretch of games here in the middle of the season where it was from week 7 to week 14, where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those games were huge. And then the injury concerns all started to creep up again. And that's been another thing too with him. A lot of soft tissue injuries throughout his career. That you do kind of tend to see that with some of these more athletic guys. Um, it's less about the player. Like I don't have a problem with the player. I think David Njoku is a great talent. I just don't like anything having to do with the Cleveland Browns offense this year.
yeah. I mean, like you said, he was a per game tight end 4 last year. 3 straight seasons that he's been a top 10 tight end, and still, approaching the top of the age curve. So would expect a few more years of that sort of production. But I think when I look at, and I don't know who's all in this tier. I don't know if we're there yet, but yeah, when I look at David Njoku is one of them. Evan Ingram is another, and then he's in the next tier. But I'll throw Jonnu Smith as well. I think these 3 guys specifically are the exact reason that you want to exercise patience with tight ends, because David Njoku, first round pick, off the charts athleticism. We had such high expectations for him back in 2017. He was bad as a rookie, bad in year 2, bad in year 3, bad in year 4, bad in year 5. It took him till his age 27 year to finally break out. And like I said, he's been a top 10 tight end for the last 3 seasons now. Jonnu Smith, so much promise that we saw in Tennessee. And then we got excited when he went to the Patriots. Never really panned out. Now, third team, age 29, all of a sudden he breaks out. Evan Ingram, promising rookie season, didn't recapture the production from his rookie season until year 7 with a new team. So we see this all the time. Like these guys that are very athletic and very talented and show flashes early in their career, we don't see the sustained season long production hit until they're in their late 20s. And that's why I think that there's a lot of guys right now that, Dalton Kincaid, for instance, Kyle Pitts are guys that people have soured on and they've started to fall down in the rankings. But I think these are guys you buy now at 25, 26 years old in hopes that they can follow similar trajectories to these other success stories.
There's another player in this tier that I want to talk about, and it's the other guy that we have a pretty far ranking of opinion here. Tucker Kraft. I've got him at tight end 8. You got him at tight end 13. And when I look at Tucker Kraft, I actually see a guy who had a very similar year to David Njoku, where he has this stretch of games where he was crushing it. And a lot of it was, hey, he's a guy that's still coming into his own. By week 4, we're talking about a player that was just a must start tight end every single week. And then what we ended up seeing was you get to the fantasy playoffs and things sort of fell apart. And I think that a lot of fantasy and dynasty managers hold on to that. You can't burn them in their biggest time of need. And I kind of look at these guys and I say, okay, one, I think that both players have the ability to be top 6 tight ends in any given year on production. I like, obviously, the situation in Green Bay a bit more. I like having Jordan Love there over Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, the revolving door of Dylan Gabriel, Drew Sanders, whatever that might be. So for me, I see similar players, and I'm willing to bet on the Packers offense just simply being good and things getting opened up a bit more for Tucker Kraft with Matthew Golden now on that roster as well.
I get that. I just, again, like my dynasty rankings always start with usage. And that's why I was a little bit down on LaPorta going into last year and again going into this year, and why I'm a little bit lower on Tucker Kraft as well. You say similar seasons to Njoku. Njoku had a 23% target share last year, which was 5th among tight ends. Tucker Kraft's target share at 15% was 19th among tight ends. So again, I see something similar to LaPorta's rookie season where there were a lot of touchdowns. He hauled in 7 touchdowns last year, 4th most among tight ends, and that gave him a decent fantasy output, but the usage wasn't there. 19th in target share among tight ends. And now we look at Matthew Golden into the picture. We see Luke Musgrave healthy. I see Tucker Kraft last year, the fantasy output was there because of the touchdowns, but now I see tighter target competition. I don't see elite usage from last year, and I see what's a pretty volatile profile. He is a talented player, and I do like Tucker Kraft. I think that he has at this point usurped the starting tight end job from Luke Musgrave, which, if you remember, was actually drafted ahead of Tucker
Right.
Kraft in the same draft. Like, we thought Luke Musgrave was going to be that, and Tucker Kraft was going to be the backup, and it flip flopped. I like Tucker Kraft, but I think that where his dynasty value is at right now, it's tough for me to buy him. I like buying him when he was a lot cheaper, but with him ascending up the ranks right now, it feels like you're buying on the upslope, and that's not typically something that I like to do.
I'm not necessarily suggesting to go buy him. I simply have him ranked higher. So like this is one of those where it's if you and I are in a league together, you've got him outside your top 12 and I see him as a top 10 guy. Like that's where you make a deal like that. And by the way, I'm curious to see like a little bit of context was that Tucker Kraft was coming back from a torn pec. He had the
Yeah.
slow start to the season. So I'm curious to see like what happens when we start to look at everything from week 4 onward, because from there he's a top 9 fantasy tight end. So like that's something that I'll be just keeping an eye on Tucker Kraft going into this year, because once you kind of let the cat out of the bag and you know that a guy is going to be part of your offense, you go into the offseason planning for that. The Packers didn't go into the last offseason planning for Tucker Kraft to be a big part of their offense. They planned on him rehabbing. And then the Luke Musgrave injury then led to, Tucker Kraft being the guy out there.
Some sneaky upside with Tucker Kraft too, and we took notice of this in season. Alfredo, we didn't see a lot of the goal line, but we saw it in midfield.
Mhm.
They were using Tucker Kraft as their QB tush push. I don't know if you remember those plays or not. And if you remember, the Packers were the one this offseason that was trying to ban the tush push
Like
because
3
Jordan Love,
times. Yeah.
yeah, because Jordan Love doesn't have the same athletic upside that a guy like Jalen Hurts does. I don't know what
And the
Jordan
Packers
Love
just
squats.
woke up in this whole offseason just with the biggest hater energy.
Seriously.
It's
And I also do want to
phenomenal to
say,
do it so publicly.
did you see Dan Campbell was the swing vote, actually? Like, if you look, you could see who voted for what, and all of the people that voted for the
Anti-Packers.
tush push
Nice.
were the people you'd expect, with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and these hyper athletic quarterbacks. Dan Campbell out here with a 30-something-year-old non-athletic Jared Goff said, "No, we're not banning it. Like, we're gonna stop." Shout out Dan Campbell. But what I
Just
was getting
be
at,
better. Sorry.
Pretty much, yeah. That was it. Yeah, just stop him. And like he doesn't even have a guy who could run the tush push, and he still voted against it. But what I was getting at, the Packers were the ones that proposed this. And if you look last year, they did it a handful of times with Tucker Kraft, where they would just line him up under center. Now, Alfredo, this is something I have been saying for years. If you don't have an athletic quarterback, just teach your tight end to take a snap. And the Packers finally did it. So they do have Josh Jacobs, a good guy when they get
Mhm.
inside the goal line, but could be looking at some sneaky touchdown equity for Tucker Kraft if he retains that role.
Man, we didn't even talk about Kyle Pitts in this tier.
We didn't.
He's
We're in
now
agreement on
14
him.
years old. He's going to be starting high school soon.
Uh-huh.
It's going to happen. What do you do if you have Kyle Pitts? Like the reports are getting weirder, especially you hear from Falcons offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, where it's just kind of like he's still got some things to work on and got to learn how to do X, Y, Z. And you're just like, dude, what? We're in like year 5 or 4 of Kyle Pitts. And I love the prospect profile, love the athleticism, and actually the player's quite good. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes and why it just doesn't work.
He can't block. I mean, I
So
think that
what? There's
it's as
lots of guys
simple
that
as that.
can't block.
Yes and no. I think if you look at a lot of these top guys, like I talked about it, Bowers, Muller in the run game, Trey McBride, great in the run game. Sam LaPorta is great in the run game as well. And I think what happens is you get these mismatches where you can kind of counter whatever the defense is showing. So you can go out there with your formation, and if the tight end lines up and he's got a linebacker covering him, then you can switch what the tight end's doing and have him go run a route where he's obviously going to beat a linebacker in coverage. And if he's got a cornerback on him, then you switch to a run play where the tight end is going to be able to just push the cornerback off into the benches. With Kyle Pitts, you could just put a cornerback on him every single time that's going to be able to cover him okay. So they just drop a nickel corner down on Kyle Pitts. He doesn't have the fear of being a blocker, so they never have to worry about getting a linebacker on him. And he doesn't get that same mismatch advantage that other tight ends do. Like when you see George Kittle making these plays 50 yards downfield, it's because he's got a Mike linebacker covering him. And when you see him run through a defender on a screen and then take it 40 yards after the catch, it's because he's paired up against a cornerback. And Kyle Pitts doesn't get those same mismatches. So I think what they need to do at this point, honestly, is just play him full time at receiver. Stop trying to make him a tight end. Don't ever put him in line. I don't even think that he's got the athleticism to play or the shiftiness to play inside the slot. I think at this point, the Falcons should just think about moving him out to flanker and just
See,
kind of playing him as that split end. I think that's where they could potentially revive his career. He's just not a tight end.
like honestly, like I kind of think that's almost irresponsible at this point. Like the idea that the tight ends have to be able to get mismatches, I don't think truly exists anymore because defenses have changed so much, and these players on defense are such like weird hybrids now of like a
Like a
safety
Kyle Hamilton.
linebacker. Yeah, like
And
they're
we saw,
built to
saw those
cover
guys
tight
come in
ends.
to counter that, right? But not
Right.
every team has a Kyle Hamilton.
Sure, but like we're not always getting the Mike linebacker on the George Kittles. Like it does happen, but that's also just a product of creating mismatches. And how are we not there with Kyle Pitts where you can create a mismatch? Like it's I don't know. I honestly at this point I either have to believe it's 3 different coaching staffs that can't use him or it's him. And it's something that we don't know that's going on behind the scenes in the practices, in the film room, something like that. And it just gives me that little bit of pause, even though he's only like 9 years old.
The one last thing I'll say about Kyle Pitts, obviously, it's been no secret that he hasn't had the best quarterback play. The one time we saw him with a good quarterback, Matt Ryan, he had 1,000 yards as a rookie, and since then it was Desmond Ritter and Marcus Mariota. And I think last year Kirk Cousins wasn't necessarily a bad quarterback, but I think that what Kirk Cousins does didn't pair up well with what Kyle Pitts does, especially coming off the torn Achilles. Kirk Cousins just didn't have any zip on his ball. Like you could see, he was throwing his whole body into
Balls were
every
not
single
zippy.
throw, and they were just ducks. I mean, and that works for a Drake London when you want to throw it up on a lob to the boundary and let him make a play on the ball. Kyle Pitts is more of the seam slasher, the guy that cuts across the middle of the field. And I don't think that Kirk Cousins had enough juice last year that he could push those balls to him across the middle of the field. Sounds like I'm just making up excuses, and maybe I am, but I think that
You just
Michael
wanted to
Penix
say juice
has
in the balls, man. Like that's all you were doing. Just
but I think
9
Mike
straight minutes of
Penix
that.
has a much stronger arm. I think he's more confident at this point in his career throwing into tight windows. So, Lord help me, but I'm going back to the well one more time on Kyle Pitts.
Penix has the juice and the balls. That's what I'm hearing from you, Dave.
That's it. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Going
Very
full Dov climbing
mature.
here.
Very mature show. All right, next tier. This is what? Tier 4. Look at that. Tier 4. At 14, we got Jonnu Smith. 15, Pat Fryermuth. 16, Terrence Ferguson. 17, Mason Taylor, which, by the way, Dave, you are doing the Lord's work out here, pumping Terrence Ferguson up the rankings here. Yeah.
Did you see that video? How excited the Rams were about drafting him? I mean,
yeah,
I'm
sure.
a sucker for that sort of stuff.
Every coach and every team is excited about drafting a player, except the Browns drafting Shedeur Sanders. What are we doing? At 17, Mason Taylor. 18, Isaiah Likely. 19, Jake Ferguson, which you are doing the devil's work out here, pushing Jake Ferguson down. And then at 20, Elijah Arroyo. 21, Brenton Strange, which, man, we don't have to talk about him because like we're both in lockstep. I love just the idea of trading and getting Brenton Strange because it costs you almost nothing to do it. I worry that the teams that already have Brenton Strange are like, no, this is what I've been waiting into year 3 for, is this eventual moment.
Yeah, I like Brenton Strange quite a bit. And yeah, I don't think we need to talk about him too much. I think there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed with Travis Hunter in the picture now, but we have seen that Trevor Lawrence likes to throw the ball to his tight end in the short area of the field, and that could definitely be Brenton Strange. But Terrence Ferguson, I don't think we need to talk about him too much. You know, I love the profile.
No, let's do it. Let's talk about the Ferguson boys, because those are our two biggest
Ferguson boys.
We have to. Like, these are our two biggest dissenting opinions here. And I think discussing Terrence Ferguson and Jake Ferguson, where I have Jake at 15, you've got him at 22. I've got Terrence Ferguson at 19. You've got him at 14. Let's do this, because I'm very obviously leaning towards production in this year 1 and year 2, and you are very much leaning towards production over the next, let's call it 4 to 5 years. Is that safe to say?
I think so, yeah. And I do think that year 1 for Ferguson is going to be bumpy, especially with Nakua there.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, we need to. Yeah, I think Terrence Ferguson year 1 is going to be tough. But it's easy to see the writing on the wall for the long-term vision here. Devontae Adams is on a 2-year contract, but they've got an outbuilt into his year after year 1. We'll see how he does this year, but they might not want to pay him $20 million to come back in 2026. Tyler Higbee is on an expiring deal. Tutu Atwell is on an expiring deal. It seems to me like the stage is set in 2026 for Terrence Ferguson, to be number 2 behind Puka Nacua in this offense. Great blocker as well, which we know is very, very important in this offense. And did you see the number that Terrence Ferguson ended up? Jersey number?
Oh boy.
Got Cooper Kupp's old jersey number. Can you just imagine Terrence Ferguson playing out of the slot? Because I can. I like it.
I don't know if I love it or hate it. Normally I'd love it. It feels whenever a player comes in and wears something that like a previous player was just.
He's wearing the 18. What Cup wore for his first 3 years in the league. Those Cup's college and early career.
You're right. I
switched to 10.
Yeah. Okay. That's better. That's like how I felt when Jalen Waddle picked 17 and Ryan Tannehill had just left. I was like, that's cursed. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
You might have been onto something there.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Let's talk about Jakey, though. Your boy Jakey.
Jakey. Yeah. Listen, I still think that I think we're all kind of getting. Well, what's the opposite of over our skis, Dave? I'm not a skier. What's the opposite of over our skis? You can't get under your skis. Sitting back on our skis. Just ass to ground on this. Sitting back on your skis on the Dallas Cowboys.
You lose your balance and you wipe out. Yeah. I got a video I can show you.
I'd rather you didn't. I think that there's just a lot of, one, there's always like the memification of the Dallas Cowboys and who they are, but I also think there's just like, Schottenheimer, that's not the coach we all thought it was going to be. And it's just like, we've seen Brian Schottenheimer be a part of the Cowboys when their passing offense is quite good, and him calling the offense for them when it is good. And Dak Prescott is just a guy that continues to be able to support weapons around him. And sure, CeeDee Lamb he's definitely going to demand most of the targets on this offense. And I think the George Pickens thing is where a lot of people are probably going to be a little more worried, because Jake Ferguson, for a little while there, I think it's funny because Jake Ferguson, I mentioned Jalen Waddle, he sort of reminds me of him, where we've seen various versions of Jake Ferguson. I'm getting there, I promise. Where it's like, we've seen a sort of target hog version of Jake Ferguson, where it's like, oh man, at tight end, he's getting a lot of reps. And then we've seen touchdown variants guy, where it's like, he's getting a touchdown like every single week. And normally it's like you want to pick one of those things and say, but that's the reason why he's not good. And I think year after year now, if we're seeing different variations of this player and that he can be good in a successful offense, I'm not, once again, not pounding the table. I think having him at tight end 15 is very normal for where I think he's at on keep trade cut. Where is he at on keep trade cut, Dave? Jake Ferguson is tight end 17. So like to me,
Right.
that's pretty normal. But I can't have him outside of my top 20. I know you have him outside of your top 20. You have him at tight end 22. Is that because you see him maybe losing his job, or is that because you maybe see the Cowboys offense not being as good? What's the thought process there?
This is another guy who, again, like the touchdowns were great when those touchdowns hit, but trying to bank on them long term isn't something you can do. He was 17% target share in back to back years, which, funny enough, ranks 16th in both seasons. So we're looking at a guy who's kind of a tight end 2 in usage. But the day 3 draft capital for me is something that I can't ignore. And I know that draft capital at a certain point, you got to stop caring about it, but there is no
Don't do this again.
position that we care about that correlates more to draft picks than a tight end does. And ever since George Kittle was the one that kind of broke the mold as that hyper athletic day 3 guy, since George Kittle has been drafted, we've only seen 2 tight ends, 2 seasons that have scored 180 plus PPR points that have come from day 3 tight ends. And that was Jake Ferguson a couple of years ago. And that was Dalton Schultz 4 years ago. It's the only times that we've seen day 3 tight ends score 180 plus PPR points. So that's my fear, is that Dalton Schultz, after his season, just kind of faded and is now somebody that we're not even really thinking about in fantasy circles. And Jake Ferguson did it 2 years ago, and we're still holding on to that hope, but the efficiency hasn't really changed. The usage hasn't really changed. And now with George Pickens in the picture, if anything, I'd probably expect that to dip down a little bit. So a bet on George Ferguson is similar to what I was talking about with Tucker Kraft. You're betting that he can find the end zone double-digit times, which if it happens, great, but the usage isn't there. You're just hoping that he can find the end zone being a part of a good offense. And that's just not something that I like betting on in Dynasty.
Did you mean Jake Ferguson?
I
You
did mean
said
Jake Ferguson.
okay.
Yeah,
Just
it's
I
tough
just wanted
talking
to
about these
clarify.
Ferguson boys.
No,
And for
you
anyone
said
wondering,
George
they are not
Ferguson, which
actually.
is the third one
Oh
now.
my gosh, yeah. Just
Okay.
an amalgamation of both of their names.
Yeah, just all of them. Yeah. It's like the other Hemsworth brother or the other Jonas brother. Like no one knows. Just George Ferguson out here playing tight end for the Toronto Argonauts. All right. Let's get down into the nitty gritty. This is the final tier.
Last thing I want to say about this tier, Mason
Yes.
Taylor might be second on the team in targets this year. Not even kidding. Like if you look at the
No.
Jets, outside of Garrett Wilson, who else is going to be? Alan
Yeah.
Lazard, Malachi Corley, Jeremy Ruckert.
No, I get it. Like there's
He might be second on the team in targets.
It's just second on the team in targets for we don't know what that offense is going to be. Like I would hope he can be that. I don't know what that means for a Justin Fields led offense.
Right.
I don't know how many. Not that Fields has kind of shown like he can be the guy that dumps it off to the running back, but there's also been times where he's not that guy. We saw it a bit more last year in Pittsburgh, so like I'm wondering what they do this year. I almost called it in Detroit because basically that's what it is, just
Right.
East Detroit now. So I'll be curious to see what they do there. Mason Taylor being second on the team in targets is intriguing. I just don't know if second on the team on the Jets is the same thing as like being third or fourth on a good team,
Right.
you know?
Right.
All right, final tier here. And this is going to be tight ends number 22 through 26. We got Cade Otton at 22, Jatavian Sanders at 23. Oh boy, Travis Kelce at 24. Dallas Goedert at 25 and Cole Kmet at 26. And honestly, Dave, I wasn't going to include Cole Kmet, but you are a bit higher on him. You have him at tight end. I mean, when I say a bit higher, I've got him at tight end 28. You've got him at tight end 23. We're both basically saying he's probably not a starting fantasy tight end, but if you're in the highly coveted tight end premium start 2 tight end league, then yeah, say what's up to Cole Kmet. But
I'd also say Cole Kmet is probably a good buy right now, if I'm being honest, just because he is so cheap. You can get him for nothing. Like he is getting dropped in shallow dynasty leagues right now, and he's 26. And we just talked about Evan Ingram, Jonnu Smith, David Njoku, all of these guys that have these late career breakouts, and a lot of those came right after a change in scenery. Think about Evan Ingram's first year in Jacksonville, Jonnu Smith's first year in Miami. Cole Kmet, he's probably going to be in the shadow of Colson Loveland for the next year or two, but once he gets moved to a different team, we see this regularly. These age 27, 28, 29 breakouts. He's a good prospect. Had some really exciting usage through his first few years in the league. Second round pick, a change in scenery, and a age 28 breakout. Not something to completely ignore. So I'm going out right now.
I,
You can probably get Cole Kmet for a fourth round pick.
I gotta say, I'm even at like I get it for yeah, sure. Maybe you can get him in a fourth round pick. Maybe. I'm not at all jazzed about buying a guy to potentially wait 2 years for him to potentially break out another team where he potentially gets replaced again. I just I don't I almost called him the name I want to compare it to. Like Cole Kmet to me has kind of gone the way of the Dalton Schultz, where it's just like he exists. Like that's another guy that plays tight end. I just don't know that I ever want to put it as an asset in fantasy. The other guys that we have in this tier, I think, are all players that are not only the starter on their team, but I think you can probably start them in any given week. Maybe not yet with Jatavian Sanders, but I think there's some real upside there. And that's a guy like you have him at tight end 21. I've got him at tight end 25. Just because I'm curious to see what the Panthers end up doing here. They get T-Mac, Teteroa, McMillan in the draft. He's going to be a target hog. They've got so many of these other guys that play in the slot. Not that Tommy Tremble is a guy, but it's just I don't quite know what the Panthers are going to do here at tight end. And Jatavian Sanders, I can't get over that hump. What has you put him at 21, Dave?
He was starting to look good last year before he got hurt. We saw a really nice catch and run touchdown. Still a super young guy. The athletic profile is enticing. But really, I just want to buy into this Panthers offense now. While there's so much influx outside of Teteroa McMillan. There isn't
He
really
doesn't
anybody
like
there.
that.
I know that's why I fixed
Got to
myself.
call him T-Mac
Um,
or the full government name.
I just I'm willing to bet on a young player on an ascending offense. Really, though, I mean, I do like that he's tied with Bryce Young for the next couple of years, but you hear me all the time. I talk about how situations can change, and that's why a guy like Cole Kmet, who is going to be the clear tight end 2 on his team right now, I'm still willing to buy now for cheap while I can, because when it comes to Dynasty, I just try so hard not to think of situation, and I try so hard to just bet on the player and bet on the profile, because things can change so quickly. And let's say, this Ben Johnson offense is everything that has been promised and is as good as we like. Colson Loveland still isn't practicing right now. Like he hurt his shoulder last season, had shoulder surgery, and is still recovering from it. Let's say he re-injures that or whatever. Then all of a sudden we're looking at Cole Kmet as a top 10 tight end, because everyone's Cole Kmet's in the Sam LaPorta role, or he gets traded to a team that has a pressing need. There's so many things that change so quickly that I just bet on players and I bet on profiles, and I like Jatavian Sanders' profile, and that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Dave, there's not a single Marvel universe in which Cole Kmet will be viewed as a top 10 tight end, but I like your moxie.
He was drafted as a top 10 tight end last year. I mean, we've seen top 10 finishes from Cole Kmet.
Drafted as a
He's
10 tight end last year? Where? In
I'm pretty
what?
sure his ADP last year was inside the top 10. Or
In
no,
fantasy? In
that was 2 years
dynasty?
ago. 2 years ago, he was
Okay.
inside the top 10. Yeah, once they brought in Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze, he fell down a little bit. But this is a guy we've seen top 10 finishes from, a round 2 pick. And I know the short term outlook is bleak, but that's exactly when I try to capitalize. As soon as everybody starts saying, like, oh, this player sucks, end of the road, he's not going to be able to get on the field, those are the players that I'm trying to buy, because Cole Kmet, the player, nothing has changed from last year into this year except the situation. And when people overreact to a situation, that opens up a buy window.
Eh, I'm just not there. I just can't get excited about it. Even at like the price of a fourth round pick, I'm just saying, okay, yeah, I got a good backup tight end. That is a backup tight end in the NFL now. Like just kind of the Colson Loveland thing to me is damning. Like it's very much Michael Mayer. Like we can look at a guy who had this fantastic draft profile, and the difference is Cole Kmet obviously had a lot of production in the NFL, but it's like Mike Gesicki, I would say, is probably similar in like, okay, this is a guy that had a good draft profile. He's had production in the NFL, and Mike Gesicki's actually in a good situation, I would say, on the Cincinnati Bengals. And I would take him over Cole Kmet, I think, even in Dynasty. And Gesicki is 29. He's 3 years older than Kmet. And I think that's just where you and I differ. Like, I'm willing to say situation matters a lot more because I'm going to play Dynasty in a 1.5, 2 year window because we're all just making moves anyways. You say how like the rankings change so often. then I kind of think we need to play it that way then. Like, let's play it that the rankings are going to change often and values are going to change often. It's just there's going to be two sides. There's two wolves inside of all of us, Dave, and every dynasty player. So I think there's going to be some people that are going to agree with you, some people that are going to agree with me. Anyone else from this tier that you want to talk about? I think there's some interesting names here, especially some of these veterans.
I mean, I don't know what there's to say about Travis Kelce. He's fallen off the age cliff pretty hard, and they
Did you
added a
see the
ton.
picture of him going around lately?
Yeah,
The peak male
yeah,
form.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
like no,
it's
like
the off season.
listen,
He's
I don't look
35.
great. Sure, that's what I'm saying. Like I don't look
Yeah,
great with my shirt off either. But like you know what, man, he just looks like a 35-year-old that's enjoying life right now, and good
yeah.
for him.
I think if you take, I mean, he's never been like one of those guys that's just like shredded, and most
No,
NFL players aren't. Like this is something I talked to Cecil Lammy about, and he said that a lot of NFL teams say that they like a quarterback that has a little bit of a gut on him, that like they don't want these like just
the Tim
rocked
Tebow.
up like exactly, but like that type of build, and you see that with a lot of football players. Like we see these guys that are coming in just absolutely shredded, and sometimes it's okay to have a few extra pounds on you. But yeah, it really it's not even about that. It's just the downtick in usage, the downtick in efficiency. He just they try to get the ball to him, but man, just dropping balls. He's not breaking tackles like he used to. He just looks like a shell of himself. That I don't know how far he'd have to fall in a dynasty draft for me to even think about taking him. Like maybe if I started my draft with like Colston Loveland and Terrence Ferguson, and he was sitting there in like round 20, and I wanted some immediate production, maybe I'd think about it. But pretty much off limits to me in dynasty right now.
What's hilarious is that he was the tight end 5 last year,
I know.
and we hate him.
Yeah,
Don't know
and
what it is.
prior to I mean, still that was the worst year that he's had since what is it,
Mind you,
2018.
championship
2
week,
years that he
22
hasn't been
PPR
the
points.
yeah, yeah.
It's just an old guy. Like that's honestly all it is. Like I don't think there's
And,
any
and in
there's
redraft,
nothing
he'll
analytical
be in my
there.
top 10. Redraft, I'll
Yeah,
probably still sneak him inside my top 10, but in dynasty, I can't do it.
Dallas Goddard, another guy. I'm not gonna say he's old, but I think there was a lot of confusion as to where he was going. I mean, he is old. He's 30, but
Yeah.
not for the earth, but like for dynasty fantasy football. There was a lot of speculation of like where he might go and what might happen with the Eagles. I think with Kellen Moore being gone, and I don't know. Like he's just, I think he falls in that same bucket as the Cole Kmets and the Dalton Schultz and the Mike Gesicki's. We're just like, that's a tight end. It sure is.
So I broke these older tight ends up into two groups in my article. I have your bargain bin veterans, the guys that are going to be super, super cheap
Hunter
that I
Henry.
think could still be productive for the next year or two. And in that list, I have Dallas Goddard, Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, Mike Gesicki, and Noah Fant. Those are all
Nice.
guys that have decent situations right now that can be serviceable in the near future. And then I have another group of veterans that I labeled the veteran dead zone, which are buzzy names that people have gotten excited about at one point and another that I think are pretty much useless in fantasy. And in that one, I have Dalton Schultz, Juwan Johnson, Tyler Higbee, Will Disley, Tyler Conklin, Dawson Knox, and Taysom Hill. So that's kind of how I broke up veterans. I think that there's a handful of guys in decent situations right now with projectable volume that you can hope to maybe squeeze a top 10 finish out of this year. And then you've got these other guys that it's time to just move on from.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be time to move on from this episode, Dave. We went through a lot of tight ends here, a whole bunch of them, 5 tiers of tight ends, and this was a fun one. We're gonna be back again, giving you
Can I finish
guys.
one player that we've
Of
lost
course,
over? And
it
I just
wouldn't
have
be this episode if you didn't go on one more player in the tier. Yes,
And it's not even in this tier. We skipped him a couple tiers ago, but Pat Fryermuth has one of the weirdest trajectories I've seen
it's
in
almost like
dynasty
you can text
markets.
me before to let me know which players you want to talk about.
I know. I'm sorry. You can check my Twitter. I was tweeting about these guys over the
I want
weekend
to
as I
check
was
your
writing this
Twitter.
article. But Pat Fryermuth, rookie season, look good. Year two, look good. And he spiked in dynasty consensus values to tight end 5. And then last year, he was a little banged up, or I'm sorry, 2023, he was banged up. He was injured, didn't look like himself. And then his value plummeted. Last year, we basically saw the same usage that we saw in his first 2 years, and his value has fallen now all the way down to tight end 18 in consensus rankings. I'm a little bit too low on him. I think you're a little bit too low on him, Alfredo. I got to find a way to move him up my rankings. It just doesn't make sense that a guy went from tight end 5 to tight end 18 because of one injury plagued season and it never really bounced back. I don't think he's, kind of like another Cole Kmet. I don't think he's got the game breaking athleticism or upside that you want to see. But if you're looking for a guy that can be like a serviceable bye week fill in or a guy that you can maybe see grow over the next couple of years, I think Pat Fryermuth's going to be in the league for another 8+ years. He's just a natural receiver, can come up with touchdowns every now and then, and is just very, very cheap in Dynasty right now. Last
Yeah.
guy I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think he's just one of those guys that the second that the Steelers have a quarterback, it's going to be a different scenario. Aaron
Right.
Rodgers signs there. He's jumping up 2 or 3 spots in the tight end rankings. So like right now, that's kind of how you have to operate with the Steelers. Is assuming Rodgers is he's training with all of the Steelers players. He's just being Aaron Rodgers. Just let him.
I can't wait for him to pull out of this, man. It's going to be so funny when he announces his retirement.
And he puts himself into the Olympic flag football roster consideration.
Please. Yes.
I'm going to take a few years off train for that. All right. That's going to be a wrap for us. We talked about, seems like 108 tight ends. Kyle Pitts is getting younger by the second, but we're going to be back again to finish off Dynasty rankings with our Dynasty quarterbacks, Dave, next week. And then after that starts fantasy football. We're going to get you guys back into the swing of things. And as always, I want to thank everybody for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.